Hello YouTube, just making a video. This is my 2000 Ford F250 Super Duty with the 5.4 Triton. I thought I could doctor this, so I started doing a bunch of work to it, and it sat for a very long time. I got it going. It started out fine. I stressed it on some hills, and next thing you know, it started ticking. Come to find out, the studs on the exhaust manifold were shot. So I took the head off, I redid the head gasket, new studs. What I should have did was clean the valves and the seats, because that didn't fix my problem. I tried drilling and tapping welding the studs inside the head, and I couldn't get them. So I got this mess right here. I used a high heat putty, and then I wrapped it in a high heat exhaust manifold wrap, and that cured my one tick. And there was a broken stud on this top one, but all I did was just it had enough threads to bite, so I had a bunch of washers and shit. The stud was sticking out way out here, but it still clamped the manifold to the head. This side was fine, but it had a little tiny leak over here. Anyway, so I drove it like that for a while, and then all of a sudden the tick came back. So I pulled the valve covers on the driver's side right here. It started ticking again, so I gave it all new valve lash adjusters, also known as lifters. Did the same to this side, so it had all new lifters on both sides. Ran good for another week, and then a tick came back, and it was real faint. A few blocks later, it just got worse and worse. So I just started rodding the shit out of it, hoping it would work itself out. Where the logic came from that, I don't know. But didn't go away, so I came out here, I pulled the head, put new gaskets in there, and I was stressed for time. I needed this truck right away, so 7 hours later, new head gasket, and new bolts, and again the tick went away, and drove like that for another week. I've had this truck for 5 weeks now, and I dumped about $700 into this motor before I realized it had a bent rod and 2 bent valves. So now I'm pulling it at my shop, and I got the other motor. Yeah, my mess, all the parts that came off of it. And I wanted to point this out. This is my parts motor. The guy says, oh, it ran, it ticks at the top end, and I was like, great, another fucking ticking 5.4 Triton. Anyway, I pulled the valve cover, and I should have unbolted this for you guys so you guys could see. But I pulled the valve cover. Right where you pour the oil, there's a little baffle right here that deflects the oil to the passages. And anyway, that baffle was riding on top of the cam, just and it's wide enough to cover like 3 cam lobes, just rattling. So the guy said that his customer wanted a whole new motor, so they decided to put in a whole new motor. And I scored this off of him. He posted it on Craigslist for $300. The next day it was down to $250, and I asked if he'd do $200 because I didn't know what was wrong with it. Anyway, I checked everything. Everything looked good. I have another job here. And yeah, the one thing I wanted to note though is this is out of a 2000 F150. A 2000 F150. This is a 2000 F250. I don't know if you could tell, but they obviously have different motor mounts. Well, there's a cure for that. All you do is on both these 4 bolts here, those 2, and these 2. Well, technically you got to move this whole bracket off, take this bracket off, swap them over to this one, and voila, you got a F250 motor. Another note, F150, there's some drivetrain components, steering and 4-wheel drive shaft on the driver's side, so they put the oil plug on this side. Oil pan's all the same, everything's still the same. It's just motor mounts are different, and they put the oil pan plug over here. So here, I'll show you on this. This one's out of the truck. Oil pan plug is over here because there's a lot of room on the driver's side of these things. Now, another thing to note, the oil dipstick is just a fuzz shorter because there's less room in an F150 than there is in an F250. But if you could see this whole blank space right here, this is the motor mount. You take that off, it's a blank space. This is the coolant reservoir, or not reservoir, it's a coolant line. This is where your oil filter goes. Well, you unbolt it there and there, and one right there, and one more down there. And you pull that off. Well, same with this thing. This is the F250 motor mount here. Take the 3 bolts off. There's a stud right here with a size 15 nut. Well, you take that off, and this is where your oil filter goes. Obviously this one's way in the front, this one's way in the back. Well, you take off the same bolts, size 10, pull this whole thing off, put it on your F150 motor, and you're good to go. See my new head gaskets? Both of them. Those are those Valve Pro. It's supposed to be good. Probably were good if this motor stayed good. But other than that, same freaking setup. As you can tell, crank pulley, tensioner, idler, water pump. Another thing to note, I've had problems with these 5.4s. If ever you guys are stuck in a rut and your truck won't start, don't automatically assume it's fuel pump. If you got fuel pressure, stop guessing. If you think it's a coils or something like that, electrical, PCM, whatever you want to call it, computer, and you still got spark, stop guessing. Your truck just won't start because this isn't reading coolant temperature. This is a coolant temperature sensor in the block, the head. If that goes out, it acts as a theft switch. And I think don't quote me, but I think it actually even says theft when you try to start your truck and it doesn't start. It just turns and turns and turns. It sounds like it's gonna start but doesn't. Well, you remove the everyone says take the whole intake plenum off and this and that. Well, all you gotta do is remove the alternator. Alternator sits right here. Two 10mm bolts. They're on top of the plenum. There's 3. You only need to take off the 2 that's going on the cross tube, the aluminum piece. There's 2. You take the 2 10mm off, remove your alternator, set it somewhere where it's not gonna touch or arc anything, and then you can get in here. I can't remember the size of this, but you can angle in a wrench and just do these little tiny turns. You can pull the sensor out, and let's see if I can pull this plug. There you go. That's brand new. But you can pull that sensor out, angle it down or back, and turn it. Take it out, angle this top piece back, and pull it out. Same way. Put the new one in, angle it in, drop it down, twist it in, and they don't need to be overly tight. I've used thread tape on it. I've used anti-seize. Just don't touch that copper end with anything, otherwise it won't read right. Anyway, that's one thing to note about these 5.4s. Another thing is this is your knock sensor, and it's the same as the F250 knock sensor. It ties up through here, goes underneath this tube, and then there's a little tiny clip that bolts right here, or slips in right there. You unbolt it or unclip it, and you can get to this, but it's a bitch. You're better off just draining all the coolant, taking off your intake plenum, because you do these little tiny turns, and it's hard. Anyway, yeah. So 2000 F250 has the same flywheel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2000 F150. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Same flywheel. Torque bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Torque converter bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Other than that, both the motors are the same thing. Just swap out the mounts, swap out the oil dipstick, swap out it's like a coolant oil passage right there. Sometimes if you get leaks, you don't know where it's coming from, there's a little tiny gasket in here. There's an oil coolant passage right here, and there's an oil passage down on the bottom, and they're so close. When this pressure's up, it gets too hot, and you got low, or you got coolant and oil, or oil and coolant, this might be a problem. Don't automatically assume it's a head gasket. Learn from my mistake. But other than that, I'm hoping this motor fixes this problem, even though it's the same fucking headache. 5.4 Triton, 5.4 Triton, F250, F150. I already cleaned all the valve covers off, so those are going over here, especially that one, because that one's still good. This one's junk. That one's still good, but that's still good, so just leave that on, wipe it off. Still got a lot of work ahead of me. I did all this without pulling the fucking hood, without pulling the front end. Of course, you can see why. I have a genie. But all this has to come off. Radiator shroud, fan, throttle body, reservoir, belt, intake plenum. Yeah. and this is what I did. So if you could see, still got the whole front end together. All you need is a buddy. I did this by myself, and that's what happened. I cracked the fuck out of that. I had to take that out because it was hitting the engine, but the radiator's still in even. If you get this to hug this, the core support, and if you have a buddy, he can guide the motor for you while you lift this out. I have a cherry picker here at the shop also, my company shop. I'm a contractor. Anyway, yeah, there's just the ass hair room right here and the ass hair room back there. If you got a buddy, he can angle the engine around while you lightly lift it. Now, on F250s, the motor mounts go underneath this exhaust manifold and underneath this exhaust manifold. So what I should have did was got a strap and strapped those to the shock mount or something and cinched them up over here. And same thing over here, I should have just cinched them up just to open, because I had a hell of a time. These fucking mounts got hung up on these manifolds, both sides. So I'd lift, come out, pry, come over here, pry, go back in the Genie, lift, just inch by inch, boom, by myself, boom, boom, by myself, fuck it. But yeah, there's 4 bolts right there. You take that off, take the starter off. Yeah, pretty easy stuff. Time consuming, fucking pain in the ass. I'm guessing putting it back in is gonna be even worse by myself. I didn't want to take those off because those studs there's so much rust on them. I didn't want to snap them and then drill those out, put new studs in, so I did it the hard way. Other than that, everything. Oh, I just picked those up too. Those are pretty cool. Even though it was a shitty running motor, those fuckers are cool. Those are the Edelbrocks. $200. Edelbrocks 22780-0220. Brand new, not even a week old. All this started off just because of one lousy tick. Cured it, came back. Cured it, came back. Here we are today. Anyway, well, that's my story for now. You guys have a good one.